Does biblical forgiveness require an audible statement to the offender?
Oh, good question. I would say if the offender is in front of you and asking for forgiveness, then yes. Forgiveness, I think it's good to view forgiveness as a two-way street. In other words, we love to receive forgiveness, but it's really hard to actually offer forgiveness. And so when you look at forgiveness as an act of obedience, instead of maybe a tool for manipulation, we kind of can tend to hold forgiveness over people's head. Just realize it's a two-way street. And so it's really easy to receive forgiveness, but it is difficult, very, very difficult to offer forgiveness. But yes, I would say if the one offended is in front of you and is asking for forgiveness, biblically it's really not an option. We are to forgive.
So would you say the word require would be prefaced with like, if they're in front of you then? What if they're not around? What if they passed away? What if they're miles away? Do you have to wait for a conversation to happen to actually forgive? Or when can it be a one-way street?
Yeah, I don't think, for me to release someone or to be released, no, I don't think it has to be an audible forgiveness.
I like how you put that though. If they're there in front of you, why not? I mean, that seems like that's the most appropriate way, yeah. Guys, any other comments on that?
Just to piggyback, I think words mean things, and people need to hear. So we'll date myself here, but when I was a kid, there was this program called Happy Days, and there was this character on there called Fonzie, and Fonzie was cool, and so as like a junior high, elementary age kid, I had this big poster of Fonzie in my room, because Fonzie was cool.
Yikes!
But if you guys remember, what was something he had real trouble saying? He couldn't say "I'm sorry." You remember? He would say he couldn't get the words out. And I think from a communication perspective, it's important that as the offender, I say I'm sorry to the person I've offended if they are there. And I think it's equally important for that person to reply back, I forgive you. Because I think those words have power. And it's like, maybe you grew up in a home where you had a parent that never said, I love you, right? And if you were to challenge them with that, they say, well, I love you. It's not a matter of, saying it. But sometimes it's important to hear
Amen.
Those words, just as it is important to be able to say, I forgive you, and let those words have power, and then live by them. Don't take them back, but live by those words of, I'm sorry, and I forgive you.
Can I add something to that? Sometimes you may want to extend forgiveness, but the person may not be interested in that, may not want to hear it, just turns you off. In that case, I think, I was just thinking of Romans 12, when he's talking about never avenge yourself, vengeance is mine. And then he continues saying, to the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. And in other words, bless your enemy. And, a lot of times that enemy in quotes may be your spouse, maybe your son, your daughter, or maybe your father, mother. So it's not like an enemy in the sense that we typically think of an enemy, but the person may be acting in enmity towards you, and it's offending you. So in that moment, it kind of feels like that. So a way to express forgiveness, even if audibly the person doesn't want to hear it, is to bless them. I think blessing is a form of forgiveness where the individual feels that you are loving them, in a way. So I think that should be our pattern as believers.
I think there's another aspect to this too. I mean, it could be something where, you had a traumatic life experience and the person who wronged you, I mean, we've been talking a lot about that person wanting to reconcile and wanting to say, they're sorry and own that offense. You could have somebody in your life who's wronged you and has no desire to apologize, has no desire to say, hey, I understand what happened and I'm going to own that. In those cases, you can still provide forgiveness. You can still say in your heart, I know, just like Jesus sitting on the cross, or hanging on the cross, saying, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He's forgiving them. He's asking for forgiveness, even though they themselves don't have a repentant heart. So you have to think about that from that perspective too, that you may not be able to reconcile. You may not want to reconcile with that individual. You may not have that opportunity, but you can still give that forgiveness. They then have to deal with their heart and deal with that side of the situation.